All right. All right. I think we're recording now, so I'll make this the start. All right. Hello and welcome to the Easy VC podcast, your weekly espresso shot of venture capital news across the globe. I'm Max von Polnitz, Managing Director of Ajinomoto Group Ventures, where we oversee a $100 million fund focused on food tech, climate tech, and advanced materials. Every Thursday, I'll bring you 3 carefully selected stories from the world of venture capital. But today, it's a little bit different for episode number 3. I want to welcome Jonathan Tan, CEO and co-founder of Coreshell Technologies. If we had one of those clap things, I would have that function right now. But hi, Jonathan. Welcome.
Hey, Max. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you are our inaugural guest here, so I think we'll see how this advances. But let me give a little intro, and then I'll let you do the elevator pitch as well. So we'll see how my intro works for Coreshell versus yours. But in essence, Coreshell Technologies, this is a company I've known for a number of years now since you started the firm. Very exciting space. San Leandro startup that just won $1 million grand prize at the Startup World Cup Challenge 2025, beating out over 10,000 other competitors from 100 regions worldwide. So pretty impressive. Jonathan and his co-founder Roger, who've been best friends since day one at UC Berkeley, are tackling one of the biggest bottlenecks in EV adoption, battery cost and supply chain vulnerability. Their breakthrough using unrefined metallurgical silicone, yes, the cheap stuff, not the expensive synthetic kind, to create battery anodes that deliver 30 to 40% more range at 25% lower cost. So I'm super excited. This is a space that we invest in. It's a space I've followed for many years. So welcome. Let me know how I did. How was that pitch?
That was great. Better than the pitch that I was going to give. I was probably just going to do like a quick, super fast intro. You didn't tell me I was the inaugural guest, Max, so no pressure, I guess, in terms of like ruining this whole thing on day one. But no, I think you nailed it. The way that I would phrase it is that we are commercializing the only material that we've been able to find globally that can be lower cost than the current Chinese graphite, offer more range, and be completely abundantly sourced in the Western Hemisphere. There's really no other material that has those properties, and it's just basic math, right? Graphite is already dirt cheap. If you're producing something in the Western Hemisphere, it's going to be more expensive. So you need something that has inherently lower cost. And only silicon has this fantastic property of being lower cost as a commodity product, but also being able to use 10 times less material and get you the same size battery. So you can really reduce your bill of materials for that battery, which adds to that benefit of being both lighter weight, longer range, as well as cheaper to produce. So that's really what we're trying to get into commercial product as soon as we can.
And you are in a white room because you're working so hard, no background, just going through mental.
No distractions, or, we're just so busy that it's hard. I've been trying to decorate for years now and just haven't found any time.
This is true startup. What do you call it? People say, eat ramen at a seed. I think you're saying don't design the room.
Yeah, just keep it blank. I feel like I'm kind of in what are those crazy houses,
Yeah, exactly. The mental
bouncing
asylum.
off the walls. Yeah, an asylum constantly all day long. I'm just kind of locked in, that's how I roll.
Excellent. Well, look, I was a founder. I know that locked in feeling. It's probably the thing I miss most is just being super focused on a single problem to solve. And feeling like it's the most important problem in the world. So look, talk to us about, teach our listeners here about silicon anode and why that is a pain point that needs to be solved and certainly needs to be solved in the United States kind of supply chain.
Yeah, so all lithium-ion batteries use graphite right now. The entirety of the world's graphite goes through China. There's almost no graphite that's produced elsewhere. China dominates both the natural resources in terms of graphite, but also the stages of refining and making it into a battery-grade product. So they have a chokehold on this right now. And if you take a look at graphite supplies in the United States and Europe, there's effectively almost none. And so you have to look at materials that we produce abundantly in both of these regions and effectively can drive costs lower. Because the other thing that we're trying to do in terms of competing with China is also lower the cost of batteries produced here in these two regions so that we can compete with the cheap Chinese product that's coming out that's flooding the market. So those things combined really make silicon, honestly, the only option that we see as being possible of achieving both of those things. We're not the first to consider silicon as this great alternative to graphite. There's been other companies that have done it, but we're the first to be able to take the unrefined, as you mentioned, the unprocessed commodity grade silicon and convert that directly into an anode material through our nano coating process. And so we get to be the only ones that take advantage of that cost benefit of the silicon, whereas other people take a very, very highly refined synthetic silicon process, usually starting from what's called silane, which is a gas form of silicon. So that then you can get the energy density benefits, but you really don't get any of the cost benefits and the supply chain benefits that we're offering.
And so if you know nothing about battery or deep tech investing and what's the takeaway here for this space, for the battery space in the United States and creating some sort of unique supply chain in the US?
Yeah, inherently lower unit economics. So materials that are inherently lower cost
So
because
I
you're
can get a
never
cheaper car. Is
so you
that
can get a cheaper
eventually the
car,
end game?
exactly, right. You just need, I mean, we need cheaper cars, cheaper electric vehicles. We need cheaper cars in general. You know, the price of cars in general is too high. And so what we need EVs to do is that we actually need EVs to solve the cost problem for cars in general and be lower cost than their ICE counterparts in order to be mass adopted. And so for that, we need a cheaper battery because the battery is by far the largest bill of material of every EV. So the way that you can do that while producing something domestically is that you need this very cheap and abundant material to put in there, and by far silicon is the best choice. There's really nothing else that has that metric for doing so.
Okay. Well, let's kind of switch tactics here a little bit and talk also just about building a business, right? Like to the founders listening, I think these sort of discussions hopefully are a way to understand their own challenges and see how other companies solve some of those challenges. I mean, you obviously the people listening, I mean, you did pivot the company at one point prior to winning the startup challenge, prior to focusing on this particular area. What does it take to make that decision to pivot a business and focus on a new vertical, or kind of talk us through briefly on how that looks?
Yeah, I would say that to me, I think one of the key important things is to never really be so firmly in belief of your previous thoughts and assumptions that you have, and to really be guided by being open to really what the market is telling you, right? It's kind of that principle. It's probably not the exact same, but if people are telling you who they are, believe them, type of thing, right? So if you're going out to the market and you're talking to a whole bunch of people and they're telling you, hey, this is great, but man, I wish you could solve this the other problem. I wish I wish you could bring me this. And they don't say that directly, but always kind of listening to those signals and building up conviction. And I would say that as CEO, your job is to read those signals ahead of everybody else. And you're always going to have to be the tip of the spear to read that direction. And then you have to build up enough internal conviction to go convince the whole organization to make this big pivot. And I think that's the challenging part, is to have that conviction and then to be able to go say like, hey, listen, I know that this new vision is the one that will lead us to success, even if we have to spend the resources to kind of pivot the ship along the way. And you know this, especially for deep tech, that's not so simple. For a software company, I think it's a little bit more streamlined. For deep tech, you have to be thinking 2 or 3 years out ahead. And I will say that I'm proud of the fact that some of those decisions, not just by myself, but the overall company that we made 3 or 4 years ago, we weren't sure of their real potential until this year. So you have to really think like 3 or 4 years in advance. And so some things include obviously focusing on this very low cost metallurgical silicon. The other thing was to build a full scale battery facility. So to make the whole battery cell, not just the material. That has become critically important for us as well. So those types of things require some foresight and just having perception into what people actually are looking for.
And you guys on the back of that pivot raised a recent round as well, besides just winning the Startup World Challenge, right?
Yeah, that's right. It allowed us to raise, so we raised our Series A back in 2021 before the pivot. And then afterwards, we were able to raise another $24 million in our A2 round. Part of that was led by our partners Fairglobe, who's the largest producer of commodity silicon in the Western world. So obviously, making the pivot
Yeah,
was key to
great
that.
strategic partner. Yeah.
Fantastic strategic partner. And then I will say that our automotive traction, we're hopefully going to be announcing soon. That was also on the backs of not only the silicon pivot, but the ability to make full battery cells, full automotive size battery cells to show that this can be a real product.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you were talking about the pivot side, I feel like part of that also has to do with kind of your co-founder relationship. I mean, you and Roger have been best friends since what, freshman orientation at Berkeley, 18, I think before maybe 20 years ago. Most people would say never start a company with your best friend. But what made you guys the exception, and how did that ultimately, help you as the business tested kind of your resolve?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that there's definitely pros and cons to working with your best friend on a daily basis. The pros are that obviously we trust each other, right? So we know that our relationship is going to be strong regardless of the Coreshell relationship and the company. So I think that has allowed us to really be very, honest and be very open with each other when we're working together. I will say that the challenge is sometimes you can be a little too honest with your best friend, and so it gets to the point where you can develop a relationship that's more kind of that mix between personal and professional, where sometimes having a little bit of professional distance allows you to take a step back. But overall, I think we've learned to manage that. And the one thing that I will say is that if you're going to start something with your best friend, realize that it's just going to change the nature of your guys' friendship. We're going to be friends for the rest of our lives, but while we're in Coreshell, it feels more like we're a married couple trying to bring up this baby. And so you have to navigate quite a lot more with your spouse. I'm sure everyone who's married on the podcast knows there's more that you have to navigate when you're in a spousal relationship than you have when you're just gonna like hang out and drinking beers and watching football. So just kind
Nice.
of change things.
Well, look, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of this wisdom. I mean, honestly, I think even when I was building, some of my favorite kind of advice I got from other builders. So we really appreciate you sharing some of that feedback. I mean, look, like maybe just to finish things off here, I mean, share a little bit about, what inspired this entrepreneurial journey for you to begin with. I mean, this is your first company, right?
Yeah, first company. The one thing I tell everyone is that actually starting the company was probably the easiest part of the journey. Trying to keep it alive afterwards was has been the both the challenge and also the reward. But I think the thing that I've always been inspired is it's been incredible the people that we've met along the way. Just folks that are making really major impacts in large supply chains and large corporate decisions, and really some of the most impactful people in the country, in my opinion. So to be able to work with folks like that, to be able to consider some of those folks, even some of our peers now working together, it's really been truly incredible. So we're really happy to have done that and started the journey.
Cool. Well, look, we really appreciate it. A lot of what I'm trying to do on this pod is kind of distill some of the lessons of deep tech VC. I think, people, it's definitely its own unique category, to your point. It requires patient capital, it requires ecosystem building, and like you said, right, getting to know the trials and tribulations of some of your peers. So really appreciate it. And to everyone listening, I end every pod with keep building, and I think Jonathan embodies the keep building mentality. So thank you again, and keep building.
Yep. Thanks, Max. Keep building.
All right. All right, let me just stop this. All right, let me see. I hope